Since the very creation of the internet, people have been using it to figure out how to skirt the rules. Online societies on this virtual platform have emerged, with each one having its own little sliver of an infinite pie to take control over. This disconnect from the physical world is, no surprise, quite jarring from a societal and academic standpoint and serves as a gray area within modern studies to this day. What was once argued as a pillar of freedom in the developed world has quickly morphed into a colonial and toxic corporate environment, with users falling through the cracks. Users' data, personalities, and ultimately their online identities are now personified and commercialized for free, and sold as labor to the highest bidder. As Galloway and Nakamura argue in their respective journals, the hierarchies and prejudices of colonial and capitalist high society have embedded themselves into the internet. Some people online put themselves out there completely, often in an attempt to make their digital footprint as authentic as possible, while others try as hard as humanly possible to avoid it. In this sense, it seems a historical concept is making a comeback in a strange way. This, of course, is anonymity. A long time ago, when people wished to remain anonymous, they would simply wear a mask and refuse to answer questions. And while this is definitely a real execution of the concept nowadays, as we will discuss, there are many more factors that can now be altered and kept hidden while still obtaining the exact same amount of potential reach as everyone else. To summarize, a digital world calls for a digital adaptation of these concepts, especially when relating it to identity. Who you are online and the choices you make can be attributed as an extension of yourself, and posting yourself online can subsequently be declared a sovereign action. The line blurs when anonymity is thrown into the mix, as the receiver of your actions has no way to properly interpret these actions. Certain signs and signifiers can be lost in translation from point A to point B, and therefore these actions can be misinterpreted by the receiver, especially considering that the majority of what I will be researching are text-based interactions. But for now, let's start slowly with a few definitions and frameworks that we can take into our research. First of all, we are going to start with Sartre's theory of nothing. Sartre's theory largely argues that beings determine their relation to other beings by comparing themselves, or their own being, to another being. Whether or not you determine them as a being or not is up to you, but it usually revolves around figuring out how much they are like you. When you come into contact with an object you do not classify as a being, it becomes nothing, or a non-being, something that exists as a negative connotation of what you are and what you are not. While nothing is still something, both in a metaphorical and sometimes physical sense, nothing must declare itself as nothing, rejecting the world that it exists in, which is your reality, therefore making it something. Both of these identification and classification processes require a sense of self and identity, which is understanding who you are and that you are a being, and your idea of truth, or what is real, exists to reaffirm your sense of self. Morse discusses posting online as a sovereign action of self and body. Things such as pictures or text are used to produce and reaffirm an individual's sense of identity and power. Relating this back to Sartre, this can be used to help create your sense of identity and self, and subsequently your sense of truth. What is true about yourself, your surroundings, reality, how you choose to present it to others. Our self-concept and perception will never be exactly the same as someone else's self-concept of us. So, we have established a relationship between ourselves and identifying others, and our method of classification as well as a reason for this relationship playing out to begin with. However, when we move to a digital space, some of these things differ. For some, people, or I guess in this case you could say beings, have a difficult time relating to others online. The physical disconnect between them and the person typing to them from miles and miles away creates an inseparable rift of being where it can sometimes be hard to humanize or classify those online interactions as taking place with beings or non-beings. And while I can easily make the tacit assumption that there are other humans behind the screen, it still doesn't make it easier to view my League of Legends teammates as anything but human. This is the issue of anonymity in an online setting. It, just like its users, wants to remain shifty, indescribable, constantly changing and evolving as does its environment. Sartre et al. Describes the concept in a similar sense by stating, quote, "Anonymity should not be conceptualized in absolute terms, but as an inherently fluid and transitional condition that characterizes any kind of social interaction online." Stating further that anonymity stems from a complex range of technical and social issues, and while the former is very important, the majority of this video will be talking about the latter. the social methods of anonymity online manifest differently. As Sarda explains, it can be used as a double-edged sword to harm or to protect those who find themselves utilizing it. Let's take a look at a few quick examples of this, starting with a man named Shy. Or, I guess, Shay? Shay is an online, anonymous, popular creator on YouTube, and while he is still his authentic self within these videos, he hides his face completely, makes it a point of not disclosing too many personal details, and is always discreet when he is in public. While there may be some further personal reasons for why he chooses not to reveal his identity, the most glaringly obvious one is that what Shay posts himself doing is, well, it's illegal. Shay's content revolves around trespassing, vandalism, and the outdoors, culminating in a vlog-style mosh pit that he likes to label illegal freedom. Two similar content creators known as Gift Gas or Poison and Vagrant Holiday create the same type of content along a very similar spectrum of anonymity similar to Shay. While these creators do produce content anonymously, aspects of their identity are still displayed here. One can assume from uploading themselves performing these acts alone, their opinions and thoughts on law, government, borders, and freedom, as well as in their mannerisms, social skills, and interests. I believe that these are prime examples of the different kinds of sovereign acts Morse was talking about. While this may be a partial source of income for these creators, they definitely would not have picked this as a career path if they didn't enjoy doing it. They understand that this hobby may not be for everyone, and excluding the risk of judicial punishment, it is extremely physically taxing and downright dangerous. The end goal from their anonymity in this sense is to obviously reduce the risk of getting caught, while also separating their personal lives from this character. Although Shy may not be his real name, when posting online that's all he wants to be known as. You can still connect a face to a name, a voice, a personality. When you come to this question of being, you can quite easily determine that indeed the people recording themselves are beings. The more layers we strip away, however, the harder this becomes to decipher. What I'm arguing here is that with an example like Shy and the other creators I have mentioned, this connection and deduction of being via the self is very easy to decide. But if we look at something like I mentioned before, such as League players, this gets harder to do. I think that there is inherently more of a spectrum of nothing to something present here, especially if it is up to humans themselves to decide. Anonymity is interesting in this sense. We perform ourselves both in physical and digital spaces, yet we actively choose to hide ourselves on these platforms. The thing with anonymity in relation to and according to everything we have discussed so far is that it is a being which actively declares itself as nothing, regardless of the being which is questioning it, while in turn reaffirming all of our ideas and connotations of being. With that out of the way, posting online is still an act of self, whether or not people on the receiving end of whatever it is you're puking up onto a platform, you posted it for a reason, and whatever that reason is, it relates in some way back to you. Stripping away more and more layers brings us to the platform of analysis that I've chosen, Reddit. Multiple things led up to this platform. For a moment, try your hardest to ignore the memes and slop that somehow managed to claw my way back onto my Explore page and instead focus on the raw, informative, and highly personal nature of some of the aspects of the site. And no, I will not be putting Subway Surfers gameplay on the bottom of the screen, so you're gonna have to bear with me on this one.
Sometimes forget that you're, illegal shit on the right way.
In 2011, Facebook bans anonymous users from commenting without displaying their profile. Of course, this does not mean that anonymous users are not present within it. Reddit follows a similar philosophy, however, your account isn't designed to be inherently personal. What you can do on Reddit, however, is look at a user's past posts and interactions. While all options for your profile are decently limited, on the off chance someone does some digging or searches by user, any interesting places you visit while logged in will be available for anyone to see. Additionally, considering the fact that you need to be logged in to have any kind of interaction within the site, it is pretty par for the course to create something called a burner account. Within Reddit's community, a common term for this is a throwaway. In a study conducted by Eli Omernick and Sarah Osley-Sud in 2013, they used linguistic analysis and data sampling from both the news site TechCrunch as well as Facebook in order to better understand the impact that anonymity has on online communities. Within this study, they introduced the distinction between a pseudonym and anonymity. Someone like Shy would be a pseudonym, whereas someone using a burner account would be anonymous. Part of the reason why I picked this study is because they analyze comments specifically, very similarly to the type of content that I will be looking at when looking at Reddit. Reddit, as a platform, encourages these text-based interactions on forums that relate to a specific topic. Each subreddit varies in style, tone, and community, with frequent members and regulars checking and using it daily. A list of some of the subreddits I will be focusing on are as follows. These subreddits act as a vessel for people to share their honest-to-God thoughts and opinions, but with anonymity, as Sarda explains, may come malicious intent. While for the sake of this video we will assume that everything viewed on these subreddits is the truth, it is a very worthy footnote to take everything with a grain of salt. Additionally, I would like to quickly note that when researching these threads, I only took into account examples created by a clear burner or throwaway Reddit account. However, with that out of the way, the nitty-gritty of these subreddits are stories of people getting cheated on by their spouse, family members manipulating them, stories of abuse from parents or friends, life-ruining and possibly incriminating confessions of extremely hard-to-cover topics that stem from a multitude of societal and interpersonal issues. These hardships that have the ability to define who we are and how we view our reality. Like it or not, they are things that we need to work through and accept as a part of us. Screaming into the void or just knowing that others have heard you and your story is a cathartic experience like no other. Lisa Nakamura and Galloway both discussed earlier on how within a post-colonial context, prejudices and colonial/bigoted ways of thinking and hierarchies have been ingrained and installed both within the technological systems and interfaces that we operate on today. Basically, when these technologies were invented, it was rich white people designing products for other rich white people under this falsehood of progress and freedom. Nowadays, this has morphed into a we shape our tools and our tools shape us sort of situation, where the internet and systems we use on the daily easily other certain groups and cultures, with the use of algorithms, and buzzword alert on this one, learning technologies such as AI being fed racialized information. This only serves to make the problem worse and reinforce cultural and echo chamber hegemonies. Anonymity within this context, and what I have observed on Reddit, is used as a way to shout into the metaphorical void or ask for advice on a situation while avoiding these hierarchies. The digital mask that anonymity provides sets the cultural default to any of its users, which is largely dependent on the receiver. What I mean by this is that anonymity uses the system against the system. It eliminates prejudices by purposefully excluding all cultural, racial, and sexual orientations or identities regarding a person, and reduces them to this sort of pseudo-being as previously discussed. Therefore, in relation to Sartre and his theories, I believe that we would make the subconscious assumption that this pseudo-being is whatever we would define as a stereotypical being, simplifying their existence to the point where the definition or classification has no meaning. Looking at this from a historical perspective, anonymity has been used to bypass oppressive structures for years. Clearly, with the writings and arguments of Nakamura and Galloway, these structures are evidently still very real. They have just taken up new forms. It is safe to say then that on a platform such as Reddit, people's identities or sense of identity often can be a huge contributing factor to determining if they wish to remain anonymous or not. In Tsleil and Armonich's study, they concluded that what they call quote-unquote real identity comments are usually of higher quality and cohesion, stay on topic, and through word count tools revealed that real identity users use less offensive language and use more positively associated responses to posts and stories. What is important to mention here is more of my observations when browsing Reddit. One of the things that slowly caught my attention was even though the primary author was always anonymous in the cases that I viewed, usually the vast majority, if not all, of the responses to the main post/thread were from people using their regular public accounts. To support this, in Tsleil and Armonich's study, they similarly conclude that longer posts and threads are usually associated with less total anonymous participation. Quite frankly, I believe these anonymous posts and responses do not need to be of higher cohesion. These are raw and unadulterated stories and takes, and while I found this study helpful, I believe that these statistics can easily be taken out of context here. The inherent goal of these posts on these subreddits is to reveal as little about the individual as possible, and instead illustrate the situation as clearly as possible within a short window. While this may worsen the quality of their writings, I think that within our understanding of using anonymity as a tool, it serves as a sacrifice to quality in order to aid the author's personal choices. Continuing with this idea, let's look at the structural implications and interface design of Reddit. Reddit as a space which prides itself on inclusivity, creating niche and tight-knit communities that can help people find like-minded individuals no matter how specific the topic. As discussed before, colonial and prejudiced practices are implemented and active within technology, but with Reddit's user-guided and moderated systems, this can perhaps eliminate parts of this oppression and create safer spaces for those willing to go there. Nina Wakeford discusses the concept of cyberqueer spaces online and how they have manifested and changed what it means to identify as part of the LGBTQ community. Applying this, Reddit creates similar spaces with users at its core, often defining the space itself, leaving the website largely neutral. While this can create echo chambers within communities, it still serves as a way for people to interact and provide feedback. Additionally, this problem is nowhere near exclusive to Reddit and its infrastructure. Looking at the interface itself, however, I would like to go back to the sender versus receiver relationship. Looking at this from an anonymous user's perspective, they are getting feedback and results from other beings. Everyone is a being, whereas the receivers are talking to a pseudo-being. Well, going out on a limb, if you can trace these comments back to an individual, just as mentioned in Sud and Armonick's study, I observed these comments to reflect the same higher quality. This creates a power relationship within the thread that again serves the anonymous user. It should also go without saying that the usual ratio of other comments to author comments is usually quite high. In almost all of the cases I viewed on Reddit, the author receives far more theoretical effort than they put in. Coming full circle, I believe that this is because of the relationship of pseudo-being to being present. The author can use this to their advantage, but this means that they are also at the whim of other users who will base their responses off of themselves. However, as observed both by Sud and Armonick as well as myself, generally this does not have a major effect, and the conversation and replies are usually more constructive and stay on topic. As mentioned before, within Wakeford's writings, she discusses different cyberqueer spaces online and what it means for the community at large, and how these cyberspaces influence and change what it means to identify as part of the LGBTQ community. Now, off rip, I am a straight, cisgendered, white male, and I'm not going to sit here and try to explain to you what it means to be gay or ramble about the queer experience of the 21st century. However, within my research on Reddit, specifically on r/offmychest, one of the examples I kept coming across were various people sharing their coming out stories. Spaces like Reddit and tools like Anonymity further push this ability to do so without facing the societal implications head on. The coming out experience can constitute a core part of someone's sexuality or gender and, ultimately, their identity, how they present themselves and how they choose to navigate the very struggles we're talking about today. My evidence to support this claim comes from within the posts themselves, with the author often stating that they are only writing this message because they are not comfortable sharing this information with their friends or family. Additionally, if it is not explicitly stated under the rules of anonymity we have established, I feel that, because we know for certain the author is choosing to remain anonymous, it is fair to assume that they are not comfortable sharing this information even under a pseudonym that may be traced back to them. Navigating post-colonial powers in a digital setting is no easy feat. These powers are invisible, reinforced through media, and serve to hurt the reputation and representation of marginalized groups. Something within the queer experience, such as being a closeted person for whatever reason, is a harsh and unique reminder of what it means to identify as or with a group such as the LGBTQ community. This is something that only others within this space can relate to. Furthermore, this is supported additionally by Carlson and Fraser when talking about indigenous political implications on social media, stating, quote, "Since being indigenous is already considered to be a political subject, indigenous people simply expressing themselves online can be considered a potent political act." I believe the same here can be said for those a part of the LGBTQ community. Indeed, as argued by Carlson and Fraser, there has been a large amount of debate on activism online and what it may mean for those involved. Much like any other social media platform, Reddit has also seen its fair share of activist movements, less so in the organization, but more focused around discussion and questions. Here, however, again, anonymity can come into play. On a platform such as Reddit, anonymity refuting itself as an individual can serve to create a sense of community and recognition of concepts and ideas rather than personal interests. In this sense, anonymity can cause the act to function more like an entity, a belief, or a value. And as mentioned, if simply identifying as LGBTQ or being a part of a specific community is seen as a socially political act in and of itself, anonymity can serve as a mask of core concepts through platforms such as Reddit or other social media sites. While it may aid in these concepts, all of this is purely speculative based on my observations on Reddit. Additionally, in more extreme cases, it should be noted that these attempts may serve to dehumanize those within the community. Within the replies to threads, especially on r/relationship advice, however, it seemed as though people were discussing and providing input on general concepts such as abuse, internal and interpersonal struggles, invalidation and validation, as well as the acknowledgement of the feelings of both parties. The engagement of pure concepts rather than the individuals in question served oftentimes in favor of the author, creating a focus on pure advice and conceptual explanations of what may be happening or what the best way to proceed may be. In this sense, the focus on the concepts here is larger than the fine details that may catch the eyes of bias or internalized prejudices. Omitting additional details such as the gender or nationality of the author, using gender-neutral terms such as partner, or not providing if the relationship was homo or heterosexual, can further serve to protect the identity of the author and provide results that will be miles better and without insult to injury. Okay, big information and theory dump, I know, so for the rest of this video I'm going to try my best to give some closing thoughts and tie a neat little bow on this as best I can. Anonymity is a form of pseudo-being which serves to mask all aspects of identity relating to the author. While true anonymity is often difficult to obtain, there are varying degrees to which this can be achieved. This relationship of pseudo-being to being can aid tremendously in this, as well as serve helpful to use anonymity as a tool in order to navigate structural, hierarchical, and post-colonial powers and prejudices embedded within general media. It does this by simplifying the relationship of sender and receiver to an almost one-sided interaction, where the anonymous party is interacting with beings, and the beings in return are interacting with something that perceives itself and asserts itself as nothingness. Viewing and using anonymity as a tool or concept in relation with and according to your personal identity can come with a myriad of assumptions and associations, such as the general connotation of anonymity meaning something to hide, malicious intent, or personal security. But again, I believe that there is an easy spectrum here to decipher. Additionally, it raises more broad questions of why things such as gender, nationality, and sexuality are important things to mention to begin with. Why should it matter? Finishing and coming full circle back to Sartre, life experiences create our reality. They create our relationships to others. They create us. The paradoxical relationship between posting online being an act of self versus purposefully hiding the self is an interesting conundrum to dive into. Ultimately, I believe that the reason why an individual would choose to hide these aspects of their identity is just as much, if not more, of an act of self than posting to begin with. With what I have observed on Reddit, both in the quality and sheer quantity of examples that there are readily available, I believe that anonymity is something that is here to stay for good. Safe spaces like the subreddits that I have mentioned exist for a reason. I think that at the end of the day, what is most important is that when you post, you are you, no matter if others can tell or not. Nothing is still something.